Without further ado, Old Testament Rewind.
God's story. Scene 1, the Genesis.
Or God help us, we messed up already.
In the beginning, there was nothing but God, and so God spoke, and there was light. Over the course of 7 days, God created all things, the earth, animals, fish, the entire universe, and finally, a man created to be like himself.
Not bad.
But God saw that the man was lonely, and so he created a woman to be his companion.
Not bad.
Everything was perfect. God had created the man and woman, and they were in a relationship with him just as he planned until one day.
Hey, girlfriend.
Who, me?
No, I'm talking the other only woman on the planet. Yes, you.
Oh, well, what's up?
Well, I was wondering, you and that guy you hang out with seem to have it pretty good around here, but you never eat from this tree. What's up with that?
Oh, well, God's given us just one rule, that we can't eat from this tree. He says that if we do, then we'll die.
Oh, please. From eating one piece of fruit? You mean to tell me you run of the whole planet and you're scared to eat from this tree?
Okay, I'm not scared. I'm not a chicken.
So prove it.
What?
So prove it.
No.
Hey, Eve, what's going on? Man, I'm starving. You got anything to eat around here?
They had broken the one rule that God had given and messed up a perfect relationship with a perfect God. They were banished from the Garden of Eden. From then on, things didn't get much better. Man continued to get more and more evil, and that relationship that God had once had with his people was long gone. So God decided to start over. He brought a huge flood on the earth, destroying everyone in the world except one man's family, which he shut into a boat with 2 of every animal.
They were just wishing they were dead from the smell.
The family was saved from the flood and got busy repopulating the earth.
Scene 2, the promise. Time passed, and even though God had shown with the flood that he meant business, most people ignored him and continued to sin. But a few people really tried to follow him. One such person was named
Abraham.
What? What's going on? Who's talking to me?
It's me, God.
I don't believe it. God is talking to me. What have I done that you honor me?
You have obeyed me, Abraham, and so I make a promise to you. I will give you more descendants than the stars in the sky. I will make a nation of people out of you, and they will be my people.
God, this is wonderful, but where am I going to put all the people? I got this one-bedroom apartment, and
I will give you a land of your own. You will defeat all those who live in this land if you trust and obey me. It will be a land flowing with milk and honey.
wow.
Now go.
And so the promise was made, a promise that would show God's faithfulness time and again. Time passed, and Abraham and Sarah gave birth to a son. God came to Abraham and told him to sacrifice Isaac to him as a test. Abraham was just about to go through with it when an angel stopped him.
Abraham, stop! God just wanted to test your obedience to him. You passed.
Don't do that to me.
More time passed, and Isaac had kids of his own, 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob eventually had 12 sons of his own, one which was named Joseph. Now, the story of Joseph and his brothers is well known, so we can kind of fast forward through some of this. Jacob loved Joseph the most and gave him a special colored coat. The brothers hated Joseph and sold him into slavery. Joseph works for a guy named Potiphar who gets thrown into prison when Potiphar's wife hits on him. Pharaoh is disturbed by some weird dreams and hears of a guy in prison who can interpret dreams. Joseph tells Pharaoh that his dreams mean there's a famine coming throughout Egypt, and in 7 years there will be no food. Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge of Egypt to stockpile food for the time of famine, saving Egypt. Joseph's whole family joins Joseph in Egypt. During the famine, years pass, and Joseph's family gets larger and larger. This is where God's promise to Abraham begins to come true. Eventually, Joseph dies, but his family keeps getting larger and larger. A new Pharaoh comes into power, and this guy doesn't remember Joseph or like the fact that all these Israelites are in Egypt. He enslaves them all, but they keep on multiplying. Their numbers are up to about 2 million at this point. So the Pharaoh decides to put an end to the Israelites once and for all. He decrees that any boys born during this time will be put to death. It is at this time that Moses is born.
Ta-da!
Scene 3, the Exodus.
Or enter Moses. Exodus. Get it? Exodus. Exit us.
Anyways, it's at this time that Moses is born.
Hi, I'm Moses. Okay, so here's the deal. I grew up as a prince. I killed a man kind of accidentally on purpose, and there out of fear, I ran for my life to the land of Midian. Welcome to Midian, land of mystery and adventure, and best merchandise this side of the Red Sea. Sir, can I interest you in a... No, thanks. So here I am. I'm in Midian. God speaks to me from a burning bush, and he tells me to tell the Pharaoh there to release all the Israelites from slavery.
Moses, you must be joking.
Tough luck, Pharaoh. God's going to bring his power against you.
And to make a long story short,
Too late.
He did.
Blood in the Nile.
Frogs, ribbit.
Flies.
Gnats.
Dead livestock. Pew. Boils.
Hail. Pew, pew, pew. Pew, 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 pew.
Locust.
Darkness.
And finally, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt.
Israelites, if we put the blood of a perfect lamb on our doorposts tonight, God will pass over our house when the angel of death comes to kill our firstborn sons.
And God did.
Moses, my son is dead. Take your people and go.
430 years of slavery over. Did you hear that, Israelites? We're free. Come on, follow me.
And everything was going great
We're following the leader, the leader, the leader.
for about the first 5 minutes.
Moses, why did you bring us this way? The Red Sea is blocking our escape. Pharaoh changed his mind and his army is chasing after us. I wish I was back in Egypt.
I wish I had never followed you.
I wish I was dead.
Enough whining.
And so God allowed Moses to part the Red Sea, leading the Israelites through on dry ground. But the Egyptians were destroyed as the water filled back in. Over the next year, many things happened. The Israelites wandered in the desert towards the Promised Land, and God gave them the 10 Commandments to obey,
Here they are.
which they immediately began disobeying.
Oi!
They complained they were hungry.
We're hungry.
So God gave them manna, which fell from the sky. They complained that they were thirsty.
We're thirsty.
So God gave them water from a rock. They got sick of the manna.
We don't like the manna.
So God provided quails for them to eat.
It tastes like chicken.
This is how it went for the year that it took to get to the Promised Land. The Israelites were disobedient and whiny, and God continued to forgive and provide until at last they arrived at the Promised Land.
Behold, Israelites, the promised land, flowing with milk and honey.
Excuse me? I'm a little lactose intolerant. Maybe we can have some soy?
Quiet now. I have sent spies to the land to come back and report what they find.
I'm back.
Well, what did you find?
There are many groups of people living there already. They are huge. They will make dangerous enemies.
Great. This is just great.
We never get anything we want.
I wish I was back in Egypt.
I wish I had never followed you. I wish I was dead.
That's it. God has promised to give us this land, and yet you still whining and complain. He has promised to defeat the enemies before us, and yet you still do not trust him. I've had enough of you. Meshugana!
So God, who had led the Israelites to the Promised Land, punished them. They were forced to wander the desert for the next 40 years. None of those that saw God's wonder in Egypt ever got to see the Promised Land,
Oh, man.
including Moses.
Aw, man.
And to make a long story short,
Too late.
40 years passed.
Scene 4 and 5, wandering in the desert and entering the Promised Land. Moses died, and God chose a new leader for the Israelites named Joshua, who led them well.
Now listen up, Israelites. Now there are many people that still live in this land and are going to try to keep us from moving in. As long as we continue to obey, God will defeat them. After I'm gone, continue to obey him. Now that we own almost all of Canaan, continue to drive out those that still live in the land.
And so Joshua died. And to make a long story short,
Too late.
the Israelites ignored God's command to clear out all the other people living in Canaan.
Scene 6, the judges. The time of the judges was a tricky one for the Israelites. They refused to obey God, and because of this sin, more sin followed. Soon they were marrying people they shouldn't have been marrying and following false gods. They pretty much abandoned God, and God allowed them to be captured and taken prisoner by their enemies.
God help us, we've been beaten and captured by our enemies.
Hey, wait, isn't this kind of our fault?
You mean if we cleared the land as God originally requested, none of this would have ever happened?
Yeah.
God help us, we've been beaten and captured by our enemies.
And so God sent them a leader, a judge, to lead them to victory against the enemies that had captured them. And this is how it went for 325 years. Israelites would follow and obey God, and God would bless them and give them victory over their enemies.
Charge!
But then they would get kind of comfy, forget about God, and God would allow them to be beaten by their enemies. They would cry out to God for help.
God help us, we've been beaten and captured by our enemies.
God would send a new judge to free them. And on it went like this.
Charge! Hello. God help us, we've been beaten and captured by our enemies. Charge! Run away! God help us, we've been beaten and captured by our enemies. Charge!
Enough! Needless to say, they were caught in a terrible cycle of sin and disobedience that continued for 325 years. You may wonder, where does it end?
Where does it end? Where does it end?
It ends with scene 7, the king. The last judge during this time was a guy named Samuel, but when he retired, the Israelites started whining again.
We don't want a judge anymore.
Yeah, we want a king.
The Philistines have a king.
Why don't we have a king?
We never get what we want.
When they told this to Samuel, he was furious.
I am furious. Don't you people know what a king is going to be like? He will have your sons and daughters, and they'll have to cook his meals. They'll have to take care of his horses. You'll be his slaves practically.
Okay, blah, 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 yada, 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 whatever. Read our lips.
We want a king and we want it now.
So God gave them a king.
Woohoo!
He knew this would not solve everything, but he saw that they would have to learn that the hard way. During this time, there were many kings. First, King Saul.
Hey.
King Saul was a pretty good king for a while, but then he slipped into sin and disobedience, and so God replaced him with David.
Bye-bye.
What? You heard me. Now, David was a very good king, and during his rule, the Israelites finally seemed to be on track following God. Don't get me wrong, David had his share of mess-ups, like the famous Bathsheba incident.
We always have to bring that up.
But overall, David had a great rule. He set up the city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and God promises David that his son will be the one to build the temple, and that David's family will rule forever.
All right.
So David died.
But I just got here.
David died.
Whatever.
And Solomon became king. Solomon was a great king and did build the temple. By disobeying God and worshiping other false gods, Solomon set off a chain reaction that led to Israel's ruin.
I did that all?
Yeah. After Solomon's death, a kind of civil war breaks out between the north and the south of Israel.
Northern Israel is the best.
Southern is your second best.
Go north.
Northern Israel, we don't want to hear it because we're the Israelites with the best spirit.
So go back north and shut your mouth. The coolest shoes come from the south. Go Southern Israel, woo!
Anyway, Israel was split as a result of Solomon's sin. Just as God had warned, both kingdoms, the north
Go north.
and the south,
Southern spirits rocks, woo!
were ruled by king after king after king, almost all bad kings. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until...
Hey, wait a minute.
Yes, Solomon?
What about God's promise to my family, my father, that our family would rule forever? Those bad kings weren't from our family.
It's Jesus. Jesus is the king from your family who will rule forever.
Jesus?
I'm getting to it. Do you mind? You're supposed to be dead at this point.
Oh, sorry.
Where was I?
Further and further.
Thank you. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until...
Scene 8, the exile, or...
We'll be back.
During the time of the kings, God had sent prophets to speak for him, warning people away from sin.
Please, folks, back away from the sin. There's nothing to see here. Back away from the sin. Back to the God of your ancestors. I'm a trained professional. I know what I'm doing. Back to your obedient life, citizens.
But no dice. So God brought the ruin on Israel that he had promised Solomon he would. Northern Israel was captured and hauled off to Assyria. Southern Israel, now called Judah,
Southern spirits, relax! Woo!
Judah was attacked by a country called Babylon. They too were captured and hauled off to Babylon as slaves and servants. During this time, lots of interesting stuff happened.
In the news today, a man named Isaiah announces that there's a day coming soon where God will send us a deliverer. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Please, for more on the story, please join us at 5.
Apparently, 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bubblegum, were thrown into a fire furnace today and lived. More on that at 11.
In a spectacular story today, a man named Daniel was thrown into a den of hungry lions and survived. That and other stories at 5.
Reports confirm that 50,000 Jews returned to the city of Jerusalem after being held captive for over 70 years. A man by the name of Nehemiah has rallied these Jews to rebuild the walls surrounding Jerusalem. I'm Steve Green, Channel 6 News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Steve. And so it went. Time passed, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
Nehemiah became governor and led the people in an amazing thing.
My friends, the wall of Jerusalem has now been rebuilt. The time has now come for God to return to his people. We have returned to the promised land, the land that God promised Abraham. The time has come for us to return to God and living life his way.
And in a way, this happened. The people recommitted themselves to God. They didn't get it perfect, but it was closer than they had been for a long time.
Many years passed, 4 to be exact. Not much of what happened in this time was recorded.
It was about this time that Rome came in and took over Jerusalem. And while they didn't enslave the Jews, they did put a Roman king in place, and he ruled. This king's name was Herod.
Not much else happened during this time. The Jews went on with their lives following God as best they could, but never knowing what it was like to be in that perfect relationship that he had designed in the beginning.
Until one silent night.
The cry of a newborn baby was heard from the depths of a filthy stable.
But that is the rest of the story. After all, a good writer always leaves room for a sequel.